So at the very beginning of the film, we are introduced to Ralph Fiennes' character, Pushkin, who is being asked why it is that his star pupil has defected. And so we know from the beginning that that's what's happened. And the expression that he uses is that I think he had an explosion of character. This is all, of course, delivered in Russian, because for all the part of the movie that is in Russia, in which characters speaking Russian, they are all speaking Russian. So Ralph Fiennes not only mastered knowing about ballet, but actually mastered a language in which he could direct and then perform. The rest of the film then goes back and shows us the life up until that point, how it is that this story about this young boy from Ufa had got this extraordinary career, had ended up with the Kirov, and had become somebody who was celebrated for the fact that although his technique, at one point he saw that, his technique isn't the thing that's drawing everybody to him. What's drawing everybody to him is something far more ineffable. Here's a clip.
This is my favorite spot. I find I always have it to myself.
What do you think?
It's always Russia. It's always the Russians. The French invented the ballet, but the energy always comes in from the East.
What are you saying? I don't understand.
What you do is not technically perfect. Sometimes it's even a little bit clumsy. But its spirit is perfect. You take the stage, and that's more important. Only one thing can stop you at your premiere, and that's fear.
I shall fight fear.
One of the things that's interesting about the film is any film that is about ballet is often to do. I mean, ballet films sort of tend to return almost obsessively to themes of transformation. So if you think, for example, of Powell and Pressburger's The Red Shoes, or if you think of Dario Argento's original Suspiria as opposed to the remake of Suspiria, which is more to do with kind of modern dance, or you think last week about the film Girl, which I know has provoked some controversy and some people are, have political objections to it. I think it's a better film than it has been given credit for with that. But because so much of ballet is to do with creating a sort of almost a physical transformation, you basically have to take really strong dancers, male and female, and they have to do something that makes them appear weightless. So they fly, so they spin, so they twirl. I mean, there is always that thing with ballet that when you watch it, the sort of the disjunct between the amount of physical pain, energy, and effort that's involved in doing what they're doing, and then the spectacle of watching it, in which the whole thing is it's graceful and light. I mean, it's like the cliche about the swan, that the bit of the swan that you see going along at the top is very, very sedate, and underneath everything is sort of frantically churning. Because ballet is such a strange discipline. It requires the most unbelievable. I mean, just the whole idea of being on point is something which I actually find quite scary. And so the film is about becoming a dancer and obeying the rules of dance, whilst at the same time not obeying the rules. So the central thing about its character is that he is a rebellious spirit. He's an individual. He's an iconoclast. He doesn't follow rules. I mean, in his personal life, he's here, he's there, he's everywhere. And yet, in order for ballet to work, you have to conform. There are things that you have to do. You have to learn disciplines, and that's all part and parcel of the story. And I think one of the things that the film manages to do quite interestingly is to be. I mean, on the one hand, it's a political thriller. It's about somebody defecting from the East to the West. On the other hand, it's a sort of a romance, or it's a multiple romance, because there's lots of sort of different engagements going on all the way through it. And we have at the center of it Oligovenko, who is a terrific dancer. And I think you talked to Ralph Fiennes about this. If you're going to get somebody to play that role, you have to get a dancer who can act as opposed to an actor who can dance, in the same way that if you're Michael Bay and you're sending up people to blow up the asteroid, it would have been much more sensible to teach astronauts how to drill holes rather than getting people who drill holes and teach them how to be astronauts. That's the difference between Michael Bay and Ralph Fiennes, I imagine.
And he said if we were going to go go down the body double, it would have doubled the film length, and they didn't have very long to.
Yeah, and also, I mean, I like the fact that you can clearly see that it's the same that it's the same person. But I think at the centre of it, what's interesting is you've got the East-West, you've got the politics, the personal, you've got the discipline and the rebellious spirit. And of course, one of the things about the story is that he's going from an environment in which everything is rigorously controlled. Everything when they arrive in Paris, they are escorted to all these different places that they have to go on a coach trip, and they're all taken around, and they're told that they mustn't interact, they mustn't have dalliances with the people from the West, because he starts hanging out with Delux Coppolis's Clara Saint, and they immediately become suspicious of that. And so there's this whole thing about control and freedom and, organisation and disorganisation and discipline and rebellious, and it plays out in many different levels throughout the film. I like the way it looked. I thought that it actually had that period feel, was really sort of well achieved. You did feel like what you were watching was in and of its time. And although the story is kind of quite well known, I realised watching it how little I actually knew about the story. I mean, because I just grew up knowing who Rudolf Nureyev was, and and it was Celebrate Dancing. That, so I just kind of figured, I know that anyway. And I did think that what Fiennes did was go, okay, well, you sort of know this, but you actually don't. And here's a way of telling it in which all the things that are happening in the dance are also being mirrored in what's happening in the political life, and also being mirrored in what's happening in the personal life. And interestingly enough, I'm only thinking of this now as I'm saying it, that makes a kind of, it's an odd sort of companion piece in the same week as we have something like Us, in which I was saying what impressed me so much about Us was I thought the way that those doublings were done was really convincing. And the other thing is, you absolutely believe in the dancing. You talked to Ray Fiennes about this in the interview, because the sound of the room, the sound of the space, the sound of the dancing puts you right there in the room. I mean, you hear the feet on the floor, you hear the weight of a body going like that, you hear the physical torture, and you also see that in that central relationship between Nureyev's character and Pushkin, who is just completely buttoned up and almost completely inexpressive. And there's this question all the way through about how much he knows or doesn't know about what is or isn't happening. And then I actually thought, as it built towards the end, it became genuine. Although I knew how the thing panned out, it became genuinely tense. So I really enjoyed it. I thought it was good, and I thought it built on the promise of Invisible Woman and Coriolanus, because it's a much more ambitious film, and I think it pulled it off.